Justin said it on a Sunday afternoon. They were on the couch. Jack was napping. The house had the specific quiet of a Sunday when nothing is scheduled and nobody needs anything. Hailey had her feet tucked under her, a blanket over her legs. Justin had his arm along the back of the couch, not quite around her but close. They had been watching something, and then the something had ended, and neither of them had reached for the remote, and they were just sitting in the silence of the finished thing. 10 minutes of that. And then Justin said it. He said, "I almost didn't marry you." Hailey turned her head slowly and looked at him. He was not looking back. He was looking at the middle distance, past the television, past the window, at something that was not in the room. The look of someone who has said something they have been carrying for a long time and is now watching it exist outside of themselves for the first time. She did not say anything. She did not reach for him or pull away. She just looked at his profile and she waited. He said, "Not because I didn't want to, not because of anyone else, not because of her, because of me, because of something in me that night." He said, "The week before the wedding, the night before actually, there was a moment around 2 a.m. where I almost picked up the phone, almost called you, almost said I needed more time." Hailey was still looking at him. He said, "I didn't. You can see I didn't, but I almost did." She said, "What stopped you?" He thought about that, not performing the thinking, actually sitting with the question because it required more precision than a quick answer could hold. He said, "You did. Not anything you said or did that week. Not a conversation, just you. The specific fact of you. What you look like when you answer the phone in the middle of the night, the specific way your voice sounds when someone has woken you up. I was sitting in the dark thinking about dialing your number and I could see your face when you picked up. And I couldn't make myself be the reason for that face." She said, "Why are you telling me this now, specifically?" He said, "Because of the last few months. The Selena thing. The 3 a.m. on the yacht. I've been in a period of putting things down that I've been carrying too long. And this is the one I've been carrying the longest. Longer than all of them. This one is from before the wedding." She said, "How long?" He said, "Since the morning of the wedding. Since the moment I said the vows and thought, I almost didn't say those. I've been carrying that since then." She said, "Why did you almost call it off?" Subscribe to Justin Bieber Archives right now. We upload every day. The reason Justin almost called off the wedding is coming. He said, "Because I was terrified." She said, "Of what specifically?" He said, "Of being the person who broke you. Of you being certain. You were so certain. You've always been certain once you've decided something. And me being the one who doesn't deserve that certainty. Who takes it and then fails it." She said, "What else?" He said, "The patterns. My patterns. The way I ended things before. The dishonesty of it. I was sitting at 2 a.m. thinking, that's who you are. That's what you do when it gets hard. You avoid. You take the path that costs you the least. And what makes you think you're going to be different with her? What has actually changed?" She said, "And what had changed?" He said, "I didn't know yet. I couldn't point to evidence. I just had to decide whether to trust that I could be different before I had proven it." She said, "That's why you almost postponed it." He said, "Yes." She said, "Because you were afraid you were going to hurt me eventually." He said, "Yes." She said, "And calling it off was the way you were going to protect me from that." He said, "Yes, which I know how that sounds." She said, "It sounds like someone who was trying to do the right thing with the wrong information." Comment now. Do you think Justin was right to be scared? Or was it just fear talking? He looked at her. She said, "The wrong information being that you were definitely going to hurt me." He said, "Yes." She said, "Which you didn't know." He said, "No, but it felt certain at 2 a.m. She said, "Things feel certain at 2 a.m. that aren't." He said, "I know that now." She said, "What changed your mind?" He said, "Your face. When I thought about calling you and you picking up, I couldn't make myself do it. Not because I was a coward, because something in me knew that the fear was lying to me." She said, "The fear was telling you that you were definitely going to hurt me." He said, "Yes." She said, "But the other part of you, the part that thought about my face, that part knew the fear was wrong." He said, "Yes." She said, "And that part won." He said, "That part won." She looked at him for a long moment. She said, "Okay." He said, "Okay?" She said, "Yes. Okay." He said, "That's it?" She said, "What were you expecting?" He said, "I don't know. More, a reaction. Upset, maybe." She said, "Are you upset that you told me?" He said, "No." She said, "Then why would I be upset that you told me?" He said, "Because I almost didn't marry you." She said, "You almost postponed the wedding because you were terrified of hurting me, and then you didn't postpone it because you thought about my face, and then you married me, and then 5 years later you're sitting on this couch on a Sunday afternoon telling me the truth about the night before." He said, "Yes." She said, "That's not the story of someone who was going to break me. That's the story of someone who was scared and honest about being scared and then did the right thing anyway." He said, "I didn't tell you at the time." She said, "You're telling me now." He said, "That's not the same." She said, "It's not identical, but it's not nothing either. You told me about Selena. You told me about the 3 a.m. You're telling me this. You're in a period of saying the things you've been carrying. That matters." He was quiet. She said, "Justin." He looked at her. She said, "What was the thing you said next, after you told me you almost didn't marry me? What were you going to say next?" He said, "That I'm glad I did." She said, "Justin." He looked at her. She said, "What was the thing you said next, after you said you almost didn't marry me? What were you going to say after that?" He said, "That I'm glad I did." She said, "Say it then, the whole thing." He took a breath. He said, "I'm glad I married you, not in spite of the fear, because of what choosing you over the fear has taught me about who I can be." That night at 2 a.m. was the first time I had to decide whether to be the person who takes the easy way or the person who doesn't. I had been the person who takes the easy way before, with Selena, with other things. I had a pattern, and that night I broke it. Not because I was brave, because I thought about your face. He said, "And every time since, the Selena thing, the 3 a.m., this, every time I've chosen the hard thing over the easy thing, I've been doing the same thing, choosing you over the fear." Hailey was very quiet. He said, "That's what I wanted to say. After. That's the thing that goes with the first thing." She said, "I know." He said, "You already knew that too." She said, "I've watched you do it. Every time. I've seen you choose the hard thing. I've been watching you become the person who does that for 5 years." He said, "And?" She said, "And I'm glad I married you too." She told him something then that she had never told anyone, not her mother, not her friends, not anyone she had talked to in the weeks around the wedding. She had held it the way she holds things, quietly, in the place she keeps things that belong to the interior. She said, "I almost called you the night before the wedding." He went very still. She said, "Not to call it off, to ask you one question. I had my phone in my hand at 1 a.m., your name on the screen. I was going to press call." He said, "What were you going to ask?" She said, "If you were sure." He looked at her. She said, "I had been feeling something that week, not panic, not doubt about my own decision. Something coming from your direction. The specific quality of a person who is working through something they haven't shared. I could feel it in the way you looked at me sometimes. In the specific way you would go quiet." He said, "You felt it." She said, "I felt the shape of it, not the content, and I was lying there at 1 a.m. thinking, do I call him and ask, or do I trust that if he has something to say, he'll say it?" He said, "Why didn't you call?" She said, "Because I decided that asking would make it about my fear, and what you were going through needed to be about yours. If you weren't sure, you needed to arrive at that yourself. My asking wouldn't have given you the answer, it would have just given you pressure." He said, "So you waited." She said, "I put the phone down, I went to sleep eventually, and in the morning you showed up." He said, "And that was enough." She said, "That was everything." He said, "And you think that means something?" She said, "I think it means everything. You were terrified. You were alone in the dark at 2 a.m. with the most convincing argument for not doing the thing. And you didn't take the out. You showed up the next morning. You said the vows. And you've been showing up since." She said, "The 3 a.m. on the yacht was showing up. Telling me about Selena was showing up. Telling me this is showing up. You've been consistently choosing the hard thing over the easy thing. That's not nothing. That's everything." He said, "I was scared then." She said, "You're still scared sometimes." He said, "Yes." She said, "And you show up anyway." He said, I try to. She said, that's all it is. That's the whole marriage. Showing up when you're scared. He looked at her. She said, you thought about my face at 2 a.m. That face meant more to you than the fear. That's the answer to every question you were asking yourself that night. They sat there for a while after that. The house was still quiet. Jack was still napping. They could hear the gentle white noise from his monitor, the soft sound that means he is deeply asleep and not about to need anything. The Sunday afternoon was still open and unhurried, and neither of them was in a hurry to end it. Justin looked at the ceiling for a moment. Hailey looked at him looking at the ceiling. The distance between the night before the wedding and this Sunday afternoon was 5 years. 5 years of mornings and dinners and fights and reconciliations and the birth of a child and the building of something real. 5 years of Hailey watching the person Justin was becoming and Justin not always being able to see it from the inside. And now he was telling her about the night where it almost didn't start. He said, I should have told you sooner. She said, you told me now in the right order. He said, what do you mean? She said, you couldn't have told me this one first. The Selena thing had to come first, then the 3 a.m. on the yacht, then this. Each one set up the next. Without the Selena thing, I don't understand what you were afraid of at 2 a.m. Without the 3 a.m., I don't understand how far you've come from that version of yourself. You've been building up to this one for months. He said, I didn't plan it that way. She said, I know, but that's how it came out. In the right order. The way things usually do when you trust them. He said, I've been carrying this since the wedding. She said, I know. I've felt it occasionally, not as guilt. I didn't know what it was, as something in you that was still working through something. A door that was slightly open. I've seen it in how you look at me sometimes, like you're checking something. He said, checking what? She said, whether I'm still here. Whether I still chose you. Whether the thing you were afraid of has happened yet. He said, has it? She said, what do you think? He said, I think we're on this couch on a Sunday and you're still here. She said, yes. He said, and I told you I almost didn't marry you and you said, okay. She said, yes. He said, and the door is closed now. She said, the door is closed. He said, you've been building a picture. She said, I've been watching you build one. Everything you've told me is another piece of it, not of who you were, of who you're becoming. He said, that's a generous way to see it. She said, it's the accurate way. He said, you've seen the whole thing. She said, I've seen everything you've shown me, and I've felt the things you hadn't shown me yet. The night before the wedding was one of those things. I felt it and I put my phone down and I waited. And you showed up. He said, I showed up. She said, yes. They sat with that. He said, I kept it for 5 years. She said, and you gave it to me on a Sunday afternoon in the right amount of pieces. The Selena thing, the 3 a.m., this. They're all part of the same story. You couldn't have told me this one first. He said, why not? She said, because I needed to know about the others first to understand this one. They're the context. Without the Selena thing, I don't understand what you were afraid of. Without the 3 a.m., I don't understand how far you've come from being the person who sat in the dark at 2 a.m. thinking about calling it off. He said, you've been waiting for this one. She said, I've been waiting for you to be ready to say it. He said, how did you know there was something? She said, because I know you. And I've known for a long time that you were carrying something from the night before the wedding. I could see it occasionally, in the way you looked at me sometimes, like you were still deciding something. He said, I wasn't still deciding. She said, I know. But that's what the look was. The echo of the night you almost decided differently. He said, and you never asked. She said, I was waiting for Sunday. He looked at her. She said, I'm glad you married me too. He said, yeah? She said, yes, not despite the fear, because of what you did with it. He reached over, he took her hand, the ordinary version, the kind that happens 1,000 times across a marriage, the kind that sometimes carries no weight at all, and sometimes carries everything. This one carried everything. She held it. Jack's monitor made a small sound. Not waking, shifting in sleep. They both listened. The sound stopped. Justin said, He's okay. Hailey said, he's okay. They sat there. The Sunday afternoon open around them. The house quiet. The monitor blinking green. 5 years from the night Justin almost picked up the phone and didn't. 5 years from the night Hailey almost called to ask if he was sure and put the phone down instead. Two people who had each been alone in the dark with the same question and had each arrived at the same answer without talking to each other. And then shown up in the morning. Now on a couch with their son napping upstairs and a door that was finally fully closed. He said, I almost didn't marry you. She said, you married me. He said, yes. She said, that's the one that counts. He said, yeah. She said, yeah. What do you think Hailey felt when Justin said he almost didn't marry her? Leave your theory in the comments. I will pin the most compelling one.